On the Security Weekly News, I try to scan and produce a quick look at some of the major stories to help you keep up with what's going on in and around the industry in a short format. Myself, Aaron Leyland, Josh Marpet, and other guest commentators provide greater insight every week. I'm Doug White, and I hope that you'll look for the Security Weekly News in all of your favorite podcast catchers and subscribe for the latest content.
Welcome back to Application Security Weekly. We just talked to Melinda Marks about modernizing AppSec. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and I'm here with John Kinsella. All right, and now we're going to talk a bit more about modernizing AppSec in the news, as well as some other items here. And I think I want to start with one of yours, John,
Cool.
with the malicious NPM packages.
Yeah, so this is a, I think I put in the title on the show notes. Tell me if this sounds familiar. We've seen this in the past, but it's one of the things which I was hoping we'd find a solution to in 2024, Adrian.
Typosquatting.
Or a vendor would come out with this. It's super, it's typo squatting. One of the ones I tracked down just for curiosity. So what's going on here? They had 5 packages which are, that they've squatted. And they're targeting Roblox developers, so guys who are developing for one of the more popular video games out there nowadays. But one I tracked down is called Node-DLLS, and I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be hoping people install that instead of DLL, which is a dynamically linked library package. So not too close into typo squatting, but still close enough. Installed about 300 times, 320 I think it was. So not a ton of stuff out there, but it's, I don't know. It feels like we've known about this problem for a while. We had Melinda on there. One of the questions they had was in the survey was corporations or organizations, I should say, are one of their bigger worries is what's the source of their open source material. So it's sort of wasn't planned, but an example back to what she was just talking about. And it just feels like they should have a way to do some sort of authentication or validation of these packages by now. I know it's a massively big problem, or would be a massively big thing to implement, something on the scale of, I can't remember how many packages NPM has, but I know it's not an easy task, but it feels like there's
that's what I was wondering. Like, how many new packages does NPM get a day? Because your strategy for preventing this kind of stuff is kind of going to be limited to that. And NPM, if I'm not mistaken, got acquired by GitHub, which is owned by Microsoft. And that's one of the frustrations here is that, now this is owned by Microsoft, but only recently have they really started putting some security measures in place for this repository.
Well, I mean, I think they could start simple, right? Make it opt-in and allow people to say, hey, I'm verified. I mean, same as what, the Twitters or the Instas or whatever else, like allow people to get verified. So you have probably a small number and then that sort of grows over time. But it feels like we're not even seeing that. So it's, I don't know. I presume someone over there must be at least thinking about it over a beer, but let's see some action.
And I mean, you could do some automated stuff as well. Yeah. Like, the code was obfuscated, but you could, for each new one that was uploaded, you could run it in a sandbox somewhere. There are services that will do this for you. You can hand it off to any one of the, VirusTotal, those kinds of services that'll throw this into a sandbox and run it. And we should mention the goal of these malicious NPM libraries was to deploy info stealers, to deploy a particular category of malware that steals credentials. And targeting developers makes a lot of sense. We've seen a lot of big breaches where an engineer's laptop was hit by an info stealer and it stole API keys, stole AWS credentials, stole stuff that basically gave them access to production infrastructure or some kind of entry into a large organization to, do ransomware, whatever that next step is. But oftentimes in these cases, they're not even concerned about what that next step is. They're just going to sell those credentials.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I saw recently they, I want to say North Korea has started, they've as the price of various crypto coins increases or decreases, they've started looking for ways to mine on other people's compute again. So just one another way.
Yeah, and that's something you could do if you stole credentials. Crank up a bunch of GPU nodes until you get caught, and mine some currency. And also, info stealers, this class of malware, originally started out as stealing cryptocurrency. That was the original goal of these things, is to steal wallets, to steal cryptocurrency directly, and kind of expanded to, okay, we can grab your logged in Slack session, we can grab your logged in email session, and they start grabbing cookies from browsers, for example. So kind of expanded to that. All right. John, what happens to Linux when Linus dies?
I saw this. I think nowadays the answer is nothing, right? I think it's been one of the, I used to not be it doesn't matter. Well, so I've started speaking.
Every couple of years he gets mad and recorrects refocuses the developers in the right direction or something like that.
I used to not be his biggest fan due to that personality, and he was very grating. But I think over time he's softened, or he's realized some of the mistakes in his ways, and he's sort of done some of these things, and actually started allowing other people to have control and trusting those folks. As a result of that, I think it would be a sad day, but I think things would keep going, and it's not like he holds the keys to the kingdom anymore.
Right, and it's worth thinking about this, because I'm not sure there's even any tech giant leaders that kind of rank up at this level that he does for the impact that he's had on computing in general, right? I think it would be hard to find somebody who's had more impact than him.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And usually nowadays, at some point, usually that type of person becomes part of an organization or a corporation, right? And the next thing you know, as the bureaucracy comes in, they start making sure that that person doesn't. Yeah. Well, they ruin it, but also they make sure that it's not a single point of failure once the money's involved. It's funny, as you were saying that, I was thinking some of the big names come to my mind: Paul Vixie, James Gosling. There's some other ones out there that are recognized names. There's probably a ton of them. I don't mean to say there's not, but I think they've all they've gone to places where people are thinking about these type of questions. Yeah.
But, the other reason I say that is very few of those have kind of had their finger on the pulse and right at the heart of it for as long as him, right? True. He's been actively involved in the heart of Linux the entire time, with a few breaks here and there. But most of these other folks had their one moment, right? Where they just kind of launched a rocket, and then other people took it from there. So moving back over to threats and vulnerabilities, this Cisco bug, it's a bug in some Cisco Wi-Fi gear, I think would be, I thought of as kind of a fun example of how I go about analyzing vulnerabilities. Because most vulnerabilities out there, most of the stuff our tools show us is just an utter waste of time. And, I think, we focus so much on, we got to fix all this stuff. We never stop to think, is there any benefit in actually fixing this stuff? In some cases, we've seen where fixing vulnerabilities actually has a net negative impact on the business. But yeah, this one, kind of a classic, gets everybody fired up. There's a lot of breathless headlines. It's a CVSS 10 vulnerability. It's in network infrastructure. The access vector is network. The complexity is low. Credentials required is none. Sounds like it's going to be like another, what was that Avanti product, that VPN, Move It DMZ situation or something like that, where you'd expect a bunch of companies to get hacked through it. But interestingly, the EPSS score, which is the exploit, a prediction of whether or not we're going to see it exploited publicly in the next 30 days, is 0.04, which the closer it is to 1, the more likely it is. The closer it is to 0, the less likely. And this is about as less likely as you can get. And when you dive into it and you look, the actual exploit vector is the web console running on the device, which that web console, if it's even enabled, a lot of people are just going to disable that and manage it centrally through something, is only going to be accessible to the internal network. And the reason you would hack a Wi-Fi device is to get into the internal network. So we see this case a lot where the vulnerability, a prerequisite for hacking the vulnerability is the very thing that you would hack the vulnerability to get, right? So it's a paradox. It's like, why root is required to do this hack that gets me root, right?
I think I assume where we're going to see this one getting exploited is in either a smaller org or someplace that realized they needed a device like this, and they got it and installed it, set up, and they followed the first page of the getting started manual, and they never went through and did the hardening. I need to pause for a tiny moment and recognize the name of this software package, which has this CVSS 10 in it, and that is Cisco Unified Industrial Wireless Software for ultra. Wow, I can speak today.
Ultra reliable.
Thank you. Words. Wireless backhaul. So it's like, we saw Oracle do this a few years ago, where they start like talking about security in the name of the product. Just don't do that. But I think that's the other interesting thing here is it's not just that it's on that management interface, Adrian. It's a wireless backhaul product. So like, how many folks actually are using that? That's a fairly small use case. So it's while this is a big deal, hopefully it's not going to affect too many people in production.
Yeah, my prediction, having been a pen tester for many years, I think the only place this is going to get exploited is during pen tests.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I mean,
yeah.
At that same time, I mean, I always talk about and it is from that pen tester mindset is if I can, each little vulnerability is like a fingertip, like a finger hold, right? If you're like rock climbing analogy, and like if I can get in somewhere and like have a low access and loud, this gets me something a little bit higher, and then I'm able to maybe start sniffing off the wireless, or I'm not sure where we can go with this. Keep sort of escalating up more and more and more. But yeah, so I want to pivot one of my articles off of this one.
Okay.
To sort of show the two sides of this. So Palo Alto Networks also has a issue with their management interfaces, or its potential. So they've heard through the grapevine, so to speak, that like, hey, people are somehow compromising PAN-W devices, Palo Alto Network devices through the management interface. So there's no CVS, no CVE, no CVSS. This is not, this is sort of an early warning, which I think this is really neat to see a vendor doing. They're like, hey, if you're running this, now's a chance to, stop and make sure your stuff is secure. And they've got a link to, tips and tricks about how you actually secure those interfaces for these devices, which it's like really well laid out, shows all the things you want to do. And it's, I'd love to see more of this type of thing from vendors. It's funny. Go ahead.
I wonder what initiated this. Like I could see the Snowflake incident initiating this, that kind of situation where it's not really the vendor's fault that a bunch of people didn't have MFA enabled and were using pre-compromised passwords that could easily just be pulled off the dark web. I think a lot of vendors are seeing that and they're like, sure, Snowflake can say like, this wasn't a breach. This wasn't our fault. It was the customer's fault for not doing it. But this is part of their shared responsibility is letting customers know when they're doing something dumb, like exposing their Palo Alto web interface to the public internet, which you can probably just do a search on Shodan and get a whole list of them. And, so maybe with a Snowflake thing, maybe from a Shodan search, and they can actually see how many of their customers are exposing this web interface to the internet. And they know, it's just a matter of time before somebody finds a bug like the Cisco thing in our management interface. So let's try and get people to protect that management interface.
And I think the AppSec takeaway here for our listeners is, once again, almost all of us have some sort of management interface on our software, right? If you're doing anything of some level of complexity, there's probably going to be like an API or a command line tool or some sort of thing. But I remember, I don't know about you, Adrian, for me, at one point in my career, I realized and understood. I read and I understood that idea of like, oh, hey, have your admin interface be a separate program versus your actual what the user is going to use. So even if they have full blown access, they're not going to be able to get to the admin side of things. And it comes down to a design thing, right? How do we design these applications? What's that sort of thought process of like who's going to be trying to attack it? How are they going to get to it? And yeah, whenever possible, put this on a completely separate network, so the general bad guys out there can't get them at least as easily.
Yeah, and how often do you access that admin interface? Like, how convenient does it need to be able to access it? And if the answer is like just once when you're first setting it up and never again, or if you're accessing it every day, like that's something you have to take into account when building these things.
It's interesting, right? Because it's when I was doing like the network engineering thing years ago, like, yeah, I was that type of guy that turn off any web interface. I'll just do the clicky with the keyboard. And the most recent Cisco device I got personally, I left the web interface on and I'm going clicky with the mouse. Just like I'm at the point where like I don't need to know, Cisco iOS in detail. So like, how can I get this thing set up securely still? But yeah, it's sort of interesting just over time how that same person can look at these things from a different point of view.
And then, I think the trend of mutable infrastructure, the idea you can have production workloads that don't have an admin interface into them. Yeah. And the way you make changes to it is you just delete production and replace it with something with, with a change configuration. Yeah, I think that's an interesting tool in the toolbox as well.
Yep, love it.
Yeah, something they did on the healthcare side to protect IoT devices, healthcare IoT devices, is they have different modes. So by default, and I remember I got to play with these at a DEF CON once, where they had like the old school and the new infusion pumps set up in a network where you could just plug in your laptop and try to hack them. And basically what they do is at the hardware level, I forget if it was like a physical switch on the device or something like that, but you can just turn off all network communication that's unnecessary. So all admin access is off. That web server is no longer running on there. The only network services running are basically like it sends out logs somewhere, and that's it. So they have like a clinical mode, and the only time you put it into clinical mode is when, or I might have this reverse. Clinical mode might be the lockdown mode, but basically you have to unlock it to work on it, to change the configuration, and the rest of the time it's in this lockdown mode where you wouldn't even be able to discover it on the network. It's not even going to respond to like a ping scan or something like that.
Perfect. I mean, it's good to see the healthcare type things do that, but like, right, we talk about like the use case and, where's this going to be used? When it's a potential life or death situation, that's exactly what I want to hear, right? Deliver the wrong amount
of a drug,
Yeah, let's dosage. Turn that thing off completely. That's perfect. Yeah.
And then, kind of keeping the vulnerability thing going, we've got Mazdas have 6 infotainment bugs, which I think are quite common, right? Like infotainment systems, even though we all have them in our cars, it's not a very common attack surface that we consider or that a lot of security researchers spend a lot of time on. I think there are some automotive bug bounties out there, but again, like, I don't think Mazda is going to send you a car.
No.
Maybe if you already have the car, you can enroll in the bug bounty. And to exploit it, you have to physically plug a USB into the car. So again, like unless there's a USB exposed somewhere outside the car, like I know some people were stealing cars by removing taillights because you could plug into the CAN bus from the taillight and it could be removed without unlocking the car. Yep. Like that's a concern. But most of the car hacking I've seen tends to be through an API or the app. A lot of these cars that have apps, like I remember early on Nissan Leaf, the only authentication you needed to use the app and unlock the car and interact with the car was the VIN. And the VIN is public knowledge. If you've ever bought or sold a car, the VIN will be posted right there in the auction site. So that should not be used for authentication or authorization.
I think there was one I didn't put in the news last week. I think it was Kia. The people were figuring out just
boy,
like
Kia.
still going on, right? Again, Kia.
Leaving out the immobilizers was the worst thing.
That was horrible. But now you're able to, at least the last one I saw, you're able to steal the cars by going to a website and figuring something out and unlocking them. I don't know. If I had like a bunch of spare time on my hands, or like maybe a summer off or something, I'd look to see if I could pick up one of these cars cheap and just sit and play with it for a few weeks and see because that sounds fun to me. But
I wonder in some of these like IoT areas, like before the Mirai botnet was created, that stuff just sat there for a decade. Just all these devices just waiting to be scooped up with default credentials, web management interfaces or SSH interfaces just sitting on the public internet, admin, and it just took somebody saying, you know what, I'm going to write some scripts and some malware and just take all these over and turn it into a botnet for me. Teslas have GPUs. North Korea could mine currency on cars.
If anyone finds out, please tell me that story because I would love that so much just to see like that. That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ever since Tesla's came out and it was clear, okay, this is a software company making cars. People have been talking about the, when is that day coming when I get into my car and it won't start and there's, a ransom and I have to pay $1,000 to get access to my car back again. And I don't know. I mean, it's definitely something I worry about, particularly as fleets of imagine a long haul shipping carrier. They have all kinds of connectivity into these trucks to track the trucks and manage logistics with the trucks. Amazon's Rivian delivery trucks, like all these things have internet connectivity in some way. To manage them and track them. So there is a attack surface there.
Not to scare our listeners too much, but hey, you were talking about like building a botnet out of, the IoT devices. How about, these things, take some of these self-driving cars and build a botnet out of that and have them do a physical DOS attack against like a bridge or something that, it's like all these cars suddenly start driving towards a bridge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's particularly as these things can drive themselves, right?
Yeah, pretty crazy. You have a story here, which I think you might be saving it till the end, but still, well, I'll leave it. I think you want to save that one till the end. Where's your eyes going next?
Is it number 6?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm guessing it is. Yes.
Is it? Yeah.
Yes.
I am saving that for the end. But do you want to talk about DevSecOps professionals who can't identify the origin of their AI-generated source code?
This again comes back to, Melissa in the last half. I think one of the questions they had, a few of the questions that she had, they were the top concern from folks were AI in our organizations, and this is sort of that same type of thing. Is a lot of this stuff is moving so quickly that you're bringing this tool and you're giving some amount of data to this tool, and then also taking the data that this tool gives you and turning this into your source code for your application. But what's actually going on here is it generating it itself? Is it coming from known public sources? Is there copyright issues around this? And then just the whole overall open source thing. It's do these AI engines, when they're training them, what happens if someone starts training them on some of those Typosquatted NPM packages?
They're trained on everything. They need so much data. I think we have to assume they've been trained on bad stuff, not only malicious stuff, but just incompetent stuff, right?
And I think for larger organizations that have significant enough code bases, what I'm seeing folks do is train against the internal code base. So then at least you know what you're dealing with. You might not get as wide a range of really, I'll say, spectacular amounts of code out of it, but you know what you're getting sort of follows what has been built over the last however many years or decades your company's been around. So that seems at least a little more sane to me. But I think the numbers on hers were, I think it was like 50-ish% were actively using some amount of LLMs in their software development process. So
Melinda's
yeah.
report? Yeah.
And that comes back to this one, talking about 70% of DevSecOps professionals can't identify the source of where that's coming from.
And my take on this is who cares? Because already developers can copy and paste code from wherever,
True.
right? So shouldn't we just assume none of it's trustworthy and treat it accordingly? It's I think we should be able to catch that, whether somebody manually copies and pastes it from their old job or from one of those websites that posts code answers to questions and stuff like that.
Stack
Or
Overflow, you
if
can
it,
say.
yeah, or if it just comes from, because I mean, that's what the AI is trained on. A lot of that code, I'm sure, comes from, those same websites. So
You're taking a mindset which is probably quite healthy, right? In the security world, we usually think of it as assume breach. And I think that by itself might be part of the gap we have here. It's like, does the average, I'll say, software development organization, whether that's the developers or the managers or all the way up, how many of those folks, I don't think, I bet it's a single-digit percentage of those folks that think assume breach by default, right? So they are trusting of these things until they find a reason not to, versus the security mindset would be like, hey, I can't trust this thing at all. And the result of that is like, how do you gather or build your tooling to ensure that even if it's not trustable code, how can you say this is something that you're going to be willing to run in production?
yeah, and what was I going to say? I completely blanked. Maybe we just move on to the next thing here. What was I going to say?
Broke you.
Oh, yeah. So if you look at the Verizon data breach report, something like 40% of it is accidents. So it's not even breach. Like you want to assume mistakes as well. Maybe it's the code they wrote isn't malicious, or what AI generated isn't malicious. It's just bad. It's just bad quality code. It's something that's going to blow something up. You have to assume that as well. So it's all a quality issue is basically what I'm saying.
I think it's going to be interesting to see over the next 18 months, I'll say 18. Yeah, I'll put it at 18. The work that Anthropic's doing, trying to be more on the side of developing code. And now OpenAI is actually seeing what they're doing, and they're working on training their models better to produce better code. So I think they're both, I think it's, again, we were saying earlier, one of the, I think, more successful areas of LLM in commercial environments right now is software development. Might still be a low percentage, but so I think that those large AI organizations see the potential for money there, so they're trying to train harder so they have a useful tool.
Yeah. All right. AI will soon automate DevSecOps governance. True or false statement, John?
I'd say true.
Yeah.
Would say you go follow the other side.
Yeah, I think it's so it's one of those things that sounds great. Like when you think about it, you're like, yeah, that's doable. And then you go to do it and just everything falls apart. And you're like, oh, I need this to work, and that's dependent on this. And so none of this works. And like there still needs to be a human in the loop for this and that. Like some of the simplest things I've tried to automate, with code or, combination of AI and code. I run into so many of these, showstoppers, the website you need the data from, it's not included in the API, so you have to scrape it from the web page or something like that. It's just a lot of stuff where unless you've tried to automate it, I think a lot of people underestimate how easy it is for automation to break, or how difficult it is to really get it reliable.
Completely agree with you. But I think what the approach I would take with something like this is, can AI, can it handle 20%? of what I would need to do for that governance. And then, okay, can like start there, can like save me enough time to take a day off from the week, once a month, once a year, whatever. And then maybe over the next year or two, can I bring that 20% up to 40 or 60%? And I think that's the way I think about this type of thing. It's. I think if you go and say like it's going to solve all the problems, I'll agree with you there. But if you know there's a particular part of like that example you said, the website that's the data's not the API, but maybe it'll be there in 12 months. So, okay, I'll do that part myself right now, and we'll do the rest, see what the tool can do for some of the other things.
Yeah, like a lot of us who have tried to create databases of all the vendors and products in the industry, one of the things that we do to try and estimate private company revenue is look at the number of employees. And the LinkedIn API will not show you the number of employees on LinkedIn for a particular company. But if you go to the company page on LinkedIn, so this is just a specific example just to throw it out there. There are so many people scraping that off the company page on LinkedIn because the API doesn't make it available. And I don't think they're ever going to. It's been like that forever. I think they have some kind of strategic reason for doing that. And you can argue about how accurate that number is. Like it tends to include all the investors and advisors and board members who are not FTEs for the company. So it's already problematic in the first place. But there's just so many cases like that you run into that complicate automating things. But I agree with you. I think I don't think it means you don't try. I just think that's it does say soon automate, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be soon. I think parts of it are going to be soon, and parts of it are going to be never.
I cannot think of a part which could not eventually be done.
Okay.
I mean, the scraping, decent example, but what's to stop an LLM from figuring out how to scrape a page and get the data that it needs? I mean,
we're seeing. I can name a few companies that are doing the RPA work on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these things, and always there's new tech coming out, right? So that's going to be the interesting part. As we come up with new, look at things in like what Apple Vision goggles or something else, like the LLM's not going to know what the hell that is. But like, so there's things it's not going to be there, but there'll be a cat and mouse game. But I'm looking forward to automating myself out of a job.
Or into a different one, right?
Yes.
All right, and the last item here is also going to take the place of the song recommendation for the end of the show. But I found out the other day, my girlfriend shared this with me, but Green Day demastered for their 30th anniversary of the album Dookie. They demastered it, and what they meant by that is they took each song from that album and put them on some ridiculous format or ridiculous device. And I think there were 50 of these per song, and each song goes on a different device, and they auctioned them off or something like that. I came in way too late, and I'm very sad about it. But there's a let's get into the specific songs. Like one of them is on one of those talking fish that you put on the wall, a big mouth Billy Bass. Basket case is on that. And it's got a decent enough speaker that you can do it. And they had these toothbrushes that played music to encourage kids to brush their teeth for long enough, right? You brush until the music stops. And the song they used for that was Pulling Teeth, appropriately.
Excellent.
What were some of your favorites on here?
There was one that was using the mini disc in the end. Like I had I don't know about you, but I had friends that many, many years after the CD became popular and was sort of the standard thing, they were still holding on with their cold, dead hands to their mini disc.
There is a mini
players.
disc. I missed that.
It's number 13.
Yeah.
This is a fun list, the music box for All Myself. I didn't realize till you just said it that this was actually supported by Green Day, so that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and for each item, they have a video of somebody using each item or playing each item so that you can hear what it sounded like. So the Game Boy one is great. That's if I were to buy one, it would have been the Game Boy cartridge. And appropriately, that was Welcome to Paradise.
Yes.
And Longview is on a doorbell. Chump is on a Teddy Ruxpin. And then some of them are like ancient, like a wax cylinder, a piano player roll. Just incredible that they went to all the trouble to do all this.
Yeah, really well done. Good find.
Yep. All right. Thanks so much, John, for joining me today. It's been a fun one. We've got one more before I have to give the show back. Looking forward to it.
Definitely.
Big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Application Security Weekly. Remember to subscribe, share in the socials, check out the show notes, and we'll see you next week on Application Security Weekly.